My name is Shawna Ristic. I'm an intuitive healer and body worker in Santa Cruz, California at this moment. Not this moment, but now. My experience happened nearly 25 years ago, and it took me a very long time to open up about it. And it only started talking about it maybe 4 years ago. And so for me, I just want to, it's often hard to know where to start with a story. And so I'm kind of starting at the beginning, because I feel like what happened in my experience is it really opened me up in my intuitive skills, which were fairly present as a child. It's just that, you know, as we all happen, you know, I think we're all intuitive as children. We're all come in open and perceptive and receiving the world in that way. And then as we get older and we get more conditioned by family, and conditioned by society, and conditioned by culture, then we all start closing those attributes down, those parts down, or fitting into what's appropriate or acceptable. When I first started opening about my NDE, it was with Raymond Moody and his wife Cheryl. And Cheryl always used to tell me, stop filtering. And I said, I had no idea what that even meant. But then I've now learned that just means it's those filters that we all learn when your reality doesn't fit in with consensual reality. So for me, I was born, you might be able to say it was a near-death experience. I nearly died when I was born, and the, sorry, I took the slide out that had that one in there, and I'm thinking I should have left it in. So I nearly died when I was born, and I don't remember the experience, but I often thought later, you know, what was that about? Was that just like, so I had some attachment disorders? And as I'll talk about later, my work with the council that I work with now, it's on the other side, that I did meet in my NDE, they explained to me that was because when we're born, it's like a door that shuts to the other side. And for me, that door had to stay ajar. And so I was a little more receptive to intuition. I saw light beings, I saw disincarnate spirits and ghosts, and heard creaking stairs and had doors shutting and all sorts of interesting things, and didn't really know what that was or how to be with that. And as I grew older, I thought everybody saw these things, but then, and my friends would often see them if I pointed it out to them, but they wouldn't necessarily see it to begin with, oddly enough. And as I got older, I finally said, you know, I'm just going to have to talk to my parents about this and tell them I think the house is haunted. Because we lived in this old 18th century or 19th century house in Kansas, you know, this old prairie house. And I figured it wasn't me, that it was the house. And when I told my parents, I sat them down on the couch and I said, listen, the house is haunted. You know, there was a time when I was laying on my bed, and I remember the door was open, and it was, you know, I was laying here and the door was here, and I thought, I could just sense that there was something on the other side, and I was daring myself, do I dare see it? Do I have the courage? And I remember I was like, yeah, I'll see it, and I just kind of watched it, and then these light fingers curled around the door, and this head peeked around, this light being. It had these kind of darker eyes, but big light being, and I remember thinking, and I had at that point developed this amazing technique for not seeing these things. You do this, I don't want to see 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 this, and it goes away. And so I did that, and it went away. And then later, I remember a friend and I were walking home. These are just the anecdotes I can remember off the top of my head. We were walking home from her house, and I lived catty corner from a grade school. And there was a big alley behind it, and there was nowhere for anybody to run. There was a fence on one side and the brick walls on the other, and there was a man standing like this in the middle of the alley. And I thought, that's curious. And she and I were standing there, we kind of looked at each other, and the moment we looked at each other and looked back, it was gone. And we said, did you see that? Did you see that? And then we said, let's go the other way. But then weeks later, I'm in my kitchen in this old house, and I hear creaking footsteps in the house behind the floor behind me. And I turn and look, and I see the same jeans, the same high tops, and get to about the waist, and then it's gone. And so I just get up and go sit with my parents. Okay. So these were the sort of experiences happening in the house or around me. And so I thought, I'm going to tell my parents, and I'm going to explain to them I need some help with this. I sat them down on the couch, and I said, these are the things that are going on, and the house is haunted. And my sweet parents are an engineer and an IT person, and they told me, it's just your imagination, which means either I'm not safe or I'm crazy. Mm-hmm. And I said to them, I said, you just wait, you'll see. And at that exact moment, the attic fan went off by itself, and the doorbell started ringing by itself. But of course, the attic fan wasn't turned off all the way, and there was a short in the doorbell. That was the reasons I was given. So for me, that was I had no idea how to understand this, and so I really began to close down around this and got very afraid, and I kind of looked at them to the media to explain to me what this was. And that was the 80s, and it was Freddy Krueger and and the Poltergeist, and it was The Exorcist. That one did me in. I saw that and I started thinking, wow, her house looks like my house. And I got really afraid, and I did everything I could then to shut everything down. I still had the connection with people. I still knew that I could, really help people. I wasn't really hands-on then, but I noticed if I laid in bed and prayed at night, if I really could get the energy right, you could feel it when there was like a click or there was a certain alignment that things would happen. And that, if I would pray, I could see what this person needs. And if they could just, have this happen for them, then things are going to be okay. And it would happen. And so, but I shut the rest of it down. I didn't want to see, I didn't want to hear, I didn't want to feel it anymore. And then as I grew older, I started kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to do what everybody else tells me. Life is about the physical body. Life is about physicality. And so I really shut down the intuition and started moving more into that. And I started kind of down the darker path of life, or into that more, just the seedier areas of life. And I really, at some point I knew, I had an intuition that I really had to go there because I had to become wise young. I had to have a lot of experiences, and sometimes maybe you've had this experience too, that you realize you have to go into the darkness in order to find the light. And so I graduated high school, and I was modeling, and I was kind of starting this career, although I was in Kansas City, and they kind of like that cheerleader look, and I don't have that. So it was a little bit of a struggle, but I was really ready to do this career. And then I lost my job as a bridal consultant, which I was doing to make money. And someone said, I know how you can make money. And I said, okay. She said, but you got to be willing to do it. I was like, I'm bold. Okay. So she takes me, and I meet her at her work, which is a strip bar. And I was like, well, all right, I can do that. And so I started working in the bar and making good money, and it was a lot of money. And once you make that kind of money, it's really hard not to make that kind of money. But I really felt that it was time for me to get out, yet I couldn't. And the more I was in it, the more I started sort of spiraling down into it, and really started consuming me. It's really hard to be in relationships when you have that profession. It's really hard to be with men when you have that profession, or to even be around people when you have that profession. If anybody finds out what you do, if they're a man, that's what they want, and if they're a woman, then they don't want to be around you. So I was sort of spiraling in all of this and thinking maybe it was time to try to find a way to do something else. And I'd moved back home with my parents, and still, they didn't know what I did. I was kind of lying and just working in a bar as a waitress and all of this. But at that same time, I was dating people, and I didn't, once they found out what I did, that's kind of what they wanted to see. And once they found out, or if they didn't know, if they met me in the bar, that's what they wanted to see. It just felt like everything that my purpose in life, and I'm sure you all have, or most of you have felt this way, everything in life was about your physical, what you physically can do, your physical attributes, and how much you could seduce or not seduce, especially in the modeling career, it was that way. And so I thought, if I'm dating these people and that's all they want, and why am I not, and I'm going to work and these people are throwing money at me just to see me, why am I not making money off this? Why don't I get something out of it? And it kind of makes sense rationally, but not in your heart, And lo and behold, guess what? Clients started asking me to go on trips with them. And so I went on the first trip, That was in 1993.
Sorry.
I went on the first trip, and it was to Georgia. And I told the guys, I'm only going if it's on the up and up, and everything's supposed to be like in my own room. He just said he was bored and he wanted company and all this stuff. Okay. So I go on this trip, and he nevertheless has my plane ticket, and we have separate rooms. And then he calls me next door and he says, oh, I want something that I can't get in the bar, or, so I'm dancing for him or whatever. And then he pushes me on the bed and he's on me. And I thought, and I froze. I just went out of body and froze. What am I doing? This is crazy. How far am I going to take this? And he had the grace to stop and say, you don't want this. And I said no. And he said, go back to your room. And so I went back to my room. And that night I thought, how far am I going to go with this? I really felt if I continued on this path, it was going to really be soul damage, and there would be a point of no return. And I had another trip lined up. It was on Christmas Day. This was with a friend of the bar owner, so maybe it was safer. I think of a strip bar owner as being a safe person. And I thought, how far am I going to go with that one? Where am I going to take this? And I fell asleep pondering this. Well, as I was falling asleep, I don't know about you, but when I'm going to do something, often I'll imagine myself doing it beforehand. I'm going to go to the grocery store, so I get in the car and I see myself driving there, and then I do those things. Well, I couldn't see myself going to Minnesota. I was going to be going to Minnesota to a Chiefs game. I'd never been to a football game before, and this guy was going to fly me there with him to go to see this football game. And I thought, why can't I see myself going to Minnesota? And I said, well, gosh, I can't even see myself going to the airport. Why am I not going to go to the airport? And so I fell asleep, with all of this weighing on me as I fell asleep in the hotel room that night. And then in the middle of the night, I woke up and I sat up straight in bed and I said, I'm going to be in a car wreck and it's going to be a miracle if I make it. And then I said, self-fulfilling prophecy. Don't think that way. Go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. And so I did. And then a few weeks later, so I went back home and somehow, grace of this guy, I made it home and went on a couple of other trips around the area to visit friends, and then Christmas Day came around and we had our nice little Christmas day where you go downstairs and you open gifts and breakfast, and then my parents and my brother left to go to my extended family's house, and I went upstairs to take a nap. And I woke up from the nap and I was running late, and I thought, I gotta hurry. I hadn't even packed, so I threw everything in the bag and rush out of the house and jump in the car. And this was back in the 90s, early 90s, when cell phones were those big bags that you plug into the cigarette lighter, right? Remember those with the big whole receiver thing you hold up? Which I was all hip because I had one, and or so I thought. And so I jump in the car and I drive off, and I drive through the town, and I get up on the highway, and I think I need to call this guy and tell him I'm on my way. But my phone is in the passenger floorboard. And I think, 2 weeks prior, I had always had this feeling I needed to always wear my seatbelt. This was prior to seatbelt laws. And so I had it on, and I thought, let me go over this bridge and pass this car, and then I'll take my seatbelt off and bend over and pick up the phone. So I was just past the bridge and almost past the car, and I thought, okay, soon enough, take off the seatbelt. I bend to pick up the cell phone, and I come up, and as I come up, I come close to hitting the car. I swerve to miss, and my car nosedives into the edge, into the median, and I flip end over end across the median, then across the other 2 lanes of traffic, and they found me about 40 feet from the car turning blue. This is where I went off, and then you can see where I bounced. And then this was, so it was Christmas Day. This was on the 16th of January, so they found me about here, and the car was over there. This is going that way, and this is coming that direction. It's probably a good thing I didn't have my seatbelt on. So the miracles that happened was that the car behind me that witnessed it was a nurse. And then the car coming from the next direction was also a nurse. And so 2 nurses on the scene that basically did their best to hold my airway open. I just to flash forward a tiny bit, I never met them, and so after my accident, I wrote them thank you notes every Christmas for years. And a reporter for the Kansas City Star, I think it was in 2003, I believe, found out about our story and created a reunion for us, so that was really cool. And they told me all about what had really happened. And so what had happened was that she held my airway open, and there was just blood everywhere. But I had a day planner then, and still, but I used to jokingly call it my life. You know, where's my life? You know, I couldn't live without it. And the amazing thing is that it had scattered pages all over the highway. And there were all these passerbys stopping, and they were picking up the pieces of my life to put together who I was. This person who was living this sort of crazy, you know, spiraling down life. You know, all these people stopped to pick up my life. And she told me this big burly truck driver came up to her, and he's all big and burly, and he has an old scruffy t-shirt, and he's just wiping my blood off her face. I mean, and for me to think that many people came together for me, it was just, wow. And so they chose to ambulance me back to Ottawa, to my hometown, because there was a trauma doc who was only there twice a month and happened to be there that day. And she was able to intubate me, and then they flew me life flight to Kansas City. And I spent 3 weeks in a coma in Kansas City. So that's kind of the practical things. I can give you up to this point, or up until I started talking about my NDE, my experience was that most people couldn't hear the woo-woo stuff, but they really were interested in the miraculous recovery I have. So, you know, I had 6 broken ribs, 4 front and back, punctured lung. I broke my chin off. I have enough plates in my face. Ruptured spleen, broken ankle, head injuries. I'm sure there's more that I forgot. But what really happened to me, the real me, was I woke up, and I was in this really white room, this lit room, and there were 6 beings standing beside me, very much like the light beings I had seen when I was a child. And maybe they were angels. I didn't see wings, but they were glowing and very tall and very bright. And they slid their hands underneath my back, and then they lifted me up. And I sat up in the bed, or on this table. It wasn't really a bed, it was more like a table. And then I was standing with them, and I remember just the love I felt, and it was like, wow, my family. I didn't know them on this side, but it was family, like family before you get the family with all the drama. So real family, and the choice was, do I want to stay or go? And I didn't want to come back. I had said to my friend, even a month before, I had said to my best friend, I said, you know, I came here to do something, but it's really hard here. It's really, really hard, and I don't think I want to stay. And I know it hurt a lot of people, but they'll get over it. And I realize people don't get over that. But I had the choice now. And so I was standing there, and I didn't want to come back. And so they showed me what I had done, what I had come to do, and what would be possible from this point forward. I don't remember all of that. I wish I did. It's been, you know, a journey like all of you, trying to figure out, why am I here? You know? But I understood that it would impact a lot of people if I chose not to come back. They showed me, especially like my brother, how it would affect him and how he'd be with women, if he'd ever be with a woman, you know, after that. And then they showed me how it's kind of like the Matrix, or it's like looking out of an airplane at the city lights, you know? They showed me how all those lights are connected, and that when there's a power surge, when one light goes out, it creates a surge that dims all the lights all around it. And some far away, and some go out completely, and some just dim down, but that each of us has that capacity to create a surge like that, and that's what would happen if I left. And I really thought, boy, that can't be true. And then, you know, later, another quick flash forward. When I came out of the coma, my mom had saved all the cards and all the prayergrams. And I had hundreds and hundreds of prayergrams from people. I had no idea who they were, from churches all over the area that had found out about me and had written to just give encouragement. And with that many people holding me here, and to think about that many people would be affected had I gone. It just drove home that that's the way it is for all of us, you know, each of us. And so they showed me the power surge, and then a lot of my time on the other side was really about trying to match what I was experiencing over there with like what's going on over here. And there was one time where, well, hold on, let me tell you that in a minute. So the last thing I really remembered before totally coming out of the coma was sitting in a circle of these beings, and there were 12 of them. And I was sitting in the middle, and they were debating whether I should go or stay. And for a long time, I didn't feel like I had a choice. But I've later since understood that I was also a participant in that. And that I also, you know, am very much a part of who they are. But they debated whether I should go or stay. And then I started coming back. So like I said, a lot of my time, so this is about the council. And what were we going to do from this point forward? The collaboration. That was the other thing. It was like, do they thought, should they just nix the plan and we just call it, we scrap the whole whatever I came to do thing? Or do we send someone else in? Maybe some of you have heard of walk-ins. And for a long time I sat with that idea. Did that really happen? Maybe this isn't really me. And I'm pretty sure I'm still me. And so, as I said, from that point, a lot of coming back was really trying to match what I was experiencing over there with what I was experiencing here. You know, one thing that was so amazing about being there was the awareness of the field. There's this field of love that holds everything, and everything springs forth from it. Do any of you know the children's story, Harold and the Purple Crayon? It's like that. So Harold is this little boy, and he has a purple crayon, and the whole children's book is about how he draws a line, and he's walking on the sand, and then there's, you know, a bird, and he draws the whole book with his purple crayon. And it's like that. There's this page, this fabric of love that everything exists upon, and then we as creators and all together communally draw our lives upon it. And I felt that. It's like this pregnant potentiality, if that makes sense. Everything is possible in it. And it's all coming from goodness and from love. And I didn't want to leave it. I really wanted to stay. So there was one time where I started to come out of the coma, and I remember laying on my side and opening my eyes, and I was in a room, and at that point I was still in ICU, and so they only let someone come in like every one or two people every like hour or two that someone could come in. So my family basically just camped out in the waiting room the whole time for weeks. And so did my best friend at the time. And so I wake up and I see him sitting there, and he's sleeping, and I'm just willing him to wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. And he does. He opens his eyes and he says, "Oh, Shawna, you're awake." And, you know, I had all this fractured face stuff, and so I kind of mumbled, what? And he understood I wanted to know what happened. And I'll tell you, I don't remember what he said. I'm sure he told me his side of, you know, the accident. But what I do remember was that love vibration was there. It's in the room. It was in everything. I could feel it. The whole room was full of it. The hospital was full of it. Everything. Reality is full of it. And I could look at him, and I could see he too was a light being. All of us are. You can see it in the eyes, that glows, that light there, that he was, what I was experiencing on the other side was here. And it's just that we can't see it. We get so caught up in our minds and in our illusions that we don't see it. But I could see it then, and I could see how real it was. And then, you know, coming out of a coma isn't like the movies where you're like, I'm back, what'd I miss? You know, it's really, really hard to get back in body. I mean, it took me probably 7 years to feel like I was in my legs anymore again. So all of my effort is to just try to maintain consciousness, and then I couldn't hold it anymore, and I started falling back and falling back and falling back and falling back into this darkness, this sort of pregnant space that holds everything. You know, that pure potentiality where everything can spring forth from, you know, the void. And I later had a re-experience of that, and so this is a little tip on how you might think about it too. I was meditating and I was really frustrated. You might have had this experience where you're like, you feel like maybe some spirit wants to tell you something, but you're too busy to listen. I can't hear you. And then you finally say, okay, I'm gonna sit and meditate. There's nothing happening. And the frustration with that. And I had a friend who told me, you know, you're leaning into it too much. You're seeking. Try falling back. And I thought, okay. So I started falling back, and I paid attention to falling back and back here, and I fell back in my consciousness. And I remembered, this is it. This is what was falling backward in the coma. It's the same space that holds you. It's still here. So just as an advice, you know, when you're meditating and getting nowhere, try falling back. It's not about seeking forward and making it happen. It's really about falling back and allowing it to come and to carry you. So as I started coming out the coma, I don't really remember a whole lot besides those tidbits. But there is one interesting thing I do remember. So as I was coming out, they decided they would like strap me into these wheelchairs, which I hated it. I remember vague memories of feeling like I'm gonna slide right out and you're just gonna roll right over me. Because I was stiff as a board. I'd been in this bed for so long, and they had me strapped in this wheelchair, and they took me down to PT. And I thought it was the funniest thing, because I'm like, here I am. Oh, man, I'm looking really great here. What, you know, someone who's half conscious, and you've got him strapped to this parallel bars, trying to say walk. It was just so comical to me. I mean, I remember thinking, what are you guys doing? You know, and then they put me in the chair, back in the wheelchair, and they were wheeling me back to my room. And I remember coming down the hallway, I started to come, someone else in a wheelchair was coming towards me. And I remember looking at her and going, wow, holy cow, what happened to her, man? She is messed up. And I got closer and closer and closer, and as I got closer and closer, I realized it was a mirror.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Wow. And then I went right out of body. Just, that was too much. And that was out. And then from there, my next memories really come after, once they started transferring me. So once they transferred me from the neurologic, or from Meadowbrook Hospital, or I'm sorry, Research Medical Center, the ICU unit, to Meadowbrook Hospital. It's a neurological hospital in Gardner, Kansas. They told my parents that it would probably be 4 to 6 months to rehab, enough to go home, and that they should not expect me to ever live on my own again, to ever go back to school again, to ever really be able to function like a normal person. My aunt lives in another town and works with mentally handicapped children, and they started talking about plans for me to live with her. And I did not know that. This was just sort of the prognosis that my parents were told. They transferred me to the hospital. I do remember the ride there. All I really remember is this lady keeps talking to me. She just chattered the whole way, and I thought, is she paid to do that? Like why is she talking to me? I can't respond. I mean, this is silly. Like, you know, is she supposed to just keep me awake? You know? And now I think it's really funny, because at those moments, like, so this MDE like wiped out all filters. I still struggle with social filters. I'm not very good at them. And this is 20 years, something years later. But then there were no filters, so what went on here just came right out the mouth, and I can only imagine the things that I said to that lady and to the PT people. Why are you guys strapping me to this bar? But anyway, they brought me into Meadowbrook, and the first day they gave me a bath. And I was a bath person. That's how I healed myself. And they have these neat contraptions. They're like sardine cans. They're like this big sardine can, and they have these like little plastic chairs. They strap you all in, and then they lift you up, and then they turn you sideways, and they sit you down in the bubbly sardine can. Man, it was great. And it was the first time. Prior to that, they couldn't give me any baths or anything. They just sponge bathed me. My mom would beg them to just to teach her how to wash my hair, because there were too many tubes out of everywhere, so there was no way to put me in a bathtub. So this was the first bath, and at that point I started waking up. And the next morning I remember asking them, I know it's against hospital policy, but could I have 2 baths today? One in the morning and one at night? And they were happy to accommodate me. So a 4 to 6 month prognosis turned into 4 weeks. 4 weeks later, I was leaving the hospital. I still had a fractured ankle. My first time walking, just making sure that I'm where I need to be. The first time walking, I had toe drop, so sometimes with head injuries, your muscles will contract and the toes will start pointing, and so you can't get the flexibility to walk, and that was the main problem they thought with me. So they did ultrasound on the back of my legs, and that finally started to get things moving enough that I could start walking again. And the first day I walked was like, I was so excited. I walked everywhere, and I called, my parents had worked out that one of them would come every night just to be with me, but they were taking turns because it was quite a drive from our hometown. And I called them, like, you both got to come tonight. I got something to show you. So they both come up there, but by that point, nobody knew I had a fractured ankle. And I had walked so much that I was in pain and I couldn't walk anymore. So I said, okay. So I'm in the bathroom and I get the wheelchair and I'm like, get ready with the camera. And I come walking out and we get the picture, which I unfortunately didn't have on there, but I do have the picture somewhere. And that was the first day I walked. And then from then on, 4 weeks later, I'm out of the hospital, or not 4 weeks later, but a few weeks later. And then I still had a fractured ankle, so we had to have more surgery there. Still had some teeth missing, so we had to have implants done. But for the most part, it was pretty healed up, but not inside. It's a lot of work to come back into life. It's really hard to stay awake all day. It takes a lot of energy to be in body. I mean, bravo to all of you who are still here in body and kicking it, because it is not easy to stay in body. I'm sure that, yeah, it's just not. And I now know why, like, downtown areas have benches to sit on every end of the block. It's for those of us who can have a hard time staying in body. This is so tiring. After that, I got out. So that was in February so it was Christmas Day of '93 was the accident, and then by February I was out of the hospital. And by August I was living on my own again and going back to school and driving. So I started commuting to a community college and went back to school, and I did that for a couple of years. And during that time I started working as a waitress, and my first job was at a pancake house. And let me just tell you, when you've had fractured ribs, holding up a plate of pancakes is really not easy, but it's a great way to build up your strength. So then I started working in Kansas City at this high dollar, this fine dining restaurant on the plaza, and quickly moved from hostess to assistant manager. But then, so I had all these things that I was supposed to want, and I was miserable. And I didn't know why. I'm like, okay, I've been through all this stuff, and these people pulled me through like this. But here I am having these suicidal thoughts, and I'm like, I just can't drive myself and, do these things to these people. What's going on? And my boyfriend at the time, I had everything. I had the boyfriend, I had a decent new car, I had the nice job, and I just wasn't happy. And then my boyfriend at the time met a massage therapist. And she and I had a lot of similarities, and she was going to teach him some massage routines, and so I was going to be the guinea pig. And I didn't even know massage was a real profession. I thought it was still like, cover up for prostitution or something. I didn't know. And had a great connection with her. And later, we couldn't coordinate the rest of the session, so he gave the rest of it to me just for a massage because I was stressed out and unhappy. And I said, Willow, I have everything I'm supposed to want, right? This is what all these people say. You just need a car, you just need a house, you just need a job, and you'll be happy. But I'm not. And what's missing? Why am I not happy? And she said, well, maybe you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I said, well, what's that? She said, have you thought about checking out this massage school? I said, sure, I'll go. So I went there, and as soon as I walked in, I knew it. This is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So then I began my training in massage. I went through that for a couple of years. And after I graduated, I quit my job at the restaurant and moved to another town. I was determined to prove doctors wrong. I was going to get a degree. And so I got into Kansas University in the honors program, not bad for a head injury person, and started my practice there. And through a bunch of serendipitous, grace, my practice built, and within a year I was full-time with it and very busy. So then, at that time, because what I do is a lot of intuitive work. Information just kind of comes. You're just kind of connecting with people's energy field, and you just know stuff. Not always, depends on how open the person is and stuff like that, but I hadn't really owned that then. There were times during massage school, like there was one instance where I heard about a woman who does angel readings, and I was like, oh, what's that? So I go, and I show up, and she says, oh, they've been telling me a long time that an apprentice was coming. And when I checked in to see who you were before you came, they said an old friend returns. Would you like to be my apprentice? So I apprenticed under her for like a couple of years, just learned how to meditate, learned how to learned how to work with angels and do all this cool stuff. But that was still too woo-woo for me. It was like I had to really ground it in the physical. So my interest was really around learning anatomy. I started collaborating with Rolfers and doing a lot of trades with Rolfers and really getting a lot of their information and working with chiropractors, because I just didn't feel like anybody was going to really get it if I said, hi, would you like me to connect you with your angel? Not in Kansas. and so, but people could get it if I could say, come on, I'll fix your back. By the way, what's going on, with your financial situation, because you've got low back stuff going on here, and it seems like, you've got some security issues. Then they could hear me. So, started my practice, and I did that for 2 or 3 years, and then it was time to choose a degree. And so I decided that I would study French, because I'd always be a massage therapist and I loved French. But during that time, I still started having this depression again, and I was like, what is this? It's really about, for me, it was really about the way people treat each other. It's so hard to see it. And when you've seen what's real, it's so hard to see what people do to each other. It's so unnecessary. And I was in sort of a depression about it, and so I started journaling. And I would just write and write and write and write everything, and I started analyzing my life and what was it that made me up into who I am at this point and what brought me to this point, and analyzing and asking questions, and then at a moment, something started to respond. And it would answer my questions. And it was sort of this automatic writing. And at that point, that's where I met the council, but on this side, that I had known on the other, but now here. And so that was some of that woo-woo stuff that I didn't feel like people could hear. And people, when I would talk about it, I started to talk about the council right when I came out of the coma, and I was told, it's just your imagination, or it was the meds, or it's a healing brain, or it's something that was on the TV that you took into your consciousness. That was another one. So I just kind of hold around it because I didn't want to doubt it, and I wanted to not lose those memories. So I just held on to them very tightly and started focusing on physicality, right? That's what it's all about, fixing bodies. Although I'm doing these angel trainings and stuff too, but didn't talk about that stuff. And so the council started just becoming my biggest fan club or biggest helper. They would explain to me what was going on. That's when they explained to me, that my birth experience was to help keep the door ajar so that I could act more as a liaison between two sides. And probably that's part of what the NDE was about too, now that I look back. But and they would help me kind of understand things and just move forward and all sorts of stuff. But I was channeling them privately at night before I'd go to bed and not really telling anybody about it. And then sometimes they'd pop in the sessions and be like, ask her about Jason, ask her about Jason, ask her about Jason. I'm like, I usually just argued with them. I can't ask this woman about Jason. And finally I'm like, do you know someone named Jason? I keep hearing Jason. And she's like, well, it turns out that this woman had a brother who had died when she was young. It was a twin brother, or 9 months apart brother. And Jason was her son, her husband, who did not know her brother, and it had kind of, since he hadn't known her brother, it created this sort of separation between her and her brother. I mean, not a separation, but it kind of had pushed that part of her life behind, like a separation from that part of her life. And it, the cousin of her husband looked very much, was the same age as her brother. And that would be a really good liaison for her to reconnect with him. And had this beautiful healing session with this woman in my office. Or there were others, you know, where I would see what was maybe hung up in them in their past that was keeping them from moving forward. There was one woman who was really struggling at work. She was a professor, and she was really struggling with her colleagues. And we had this whole healing session where it turned out that she was an African American, but she had never known racism. And she went to rent, when she went to college, she tried to rent an apartment and they refused to rent to her. It was her first exposure to racism, and how that had impacted her and made her change and made her feel uncomfortable with people from that point forward. And we really had a healing around that. And then she decided to retire right afterwards. But after that session, in part of the technique, you take this information in and you bring it inside, and then you turn it into a new symbol that can be there to remind you. And hers was a rose. And I kid you not, I walk outside of the room, to the healing room after the session, I look down, there is a rose on the floor. I mean, maybe someone dropped it, maybe. Maybe the lady upstairs, the psychotherapist, she likes flowers. She might have had a rose and accidentally dropped it right in front of my door at that moment, but it just appeared. And I was like, you know, this is yours. I don't think this is for me. And so, you know, things like that happened all the time, but most of the time I was arguing with it. I'm not going to say that. I can't say that. I mean, it seems silly now, but I just didn't feel like I could open about it, you know. But sometimes it just came on so strong that I just had no choice. And so, concurrent with me, this opening up around this healing practice, because one thing I did realize when I came back was that I was here to help people find their way home, back to who they truly are, to the real home, to that vibrational space. And I was going to do that through helping them heal. And I didn't know how. And then found my way to massage school. And so I had this practice for a couple years, and here I was also studying French, and decided, well, if I'm going to have a degree in French, I've got to be fluent in French. And so I decided that I was going to go to France for a year. And I think there's some karmic connection there too, I mean, clearly. I don't really know a lot about, I jumped ahead of my slides. A lot about what my time in France was about, you know, really why I was there. But I'm going to jump ahead to and then come back. But I do remember that the one thing that I learned in France was follow the brightest path. And that has been something that has really guided me. So I would go out at night, and there's these Mediterranean towns where these like skinny streets spindle all around. It's not like America where everything's set up in grids and you can find your way, you know, north, south, east, and west. It's all these windy streets. And I would go out in the evening or later in the early night and would just walk and walk and walk and get myself lost. And then find my way home. And every time, if I only followed the brightest path, not the most lit, but that which opened me, that was the brightest, I would always find my way back home. So that was the biggest lesson in France, is just following the brightest path. And then around that same time, I don't know how to go back there. No. We'll go this way. All right. Around that same time, after I came back from France, I was still having a lot of, I just felt like there was something I wasn't remembering. You know, I still hadn't really opened up about my experience. I hadn't really told very many people about it, very, very few. And I mostly hold around it because I didn't want to lose it. And I didn't want to, it was pre-internet, so I didn't have a lot of exposure to other people who had these experiences. And I found a few books, but they were always people who had religious experiences, and that wasn't my experience at all. So I just kind of closed around these few little memories and did my work, physical work. And then there was one night I was driving home, and I remember I was contemplating what was it in the coma that I had forgotten? There was something I needed to know and that I had forgotten. And so I decided, I used to like to drive downtown Kansas City and see all the lights and look at the city lights and stuff. And so I drove around and I ended up on Truman Road, which is a part of town that I probably shouldn't have been in, as a single lady at night, but I was there. And I remember sitting at this stop sign, and then all of a sudden this big bright white light just hit me, and I just understood everything, how every person that comes into our lives is there for a reason. And that it's an orchestration, that you put up energy of what you need, and then there's a match and it comes. And that every single person had lined up to be this perfect thing that had happened. And it was just flashing person in front of my eyes. And I'm sobbing, just floods of tears coming out of my eyes. And I'm just watching these people, and then as it's starting to fade, I know I'm going to forget it, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. And so I grab onto the last person I could see that I remember, and it was the woman who had taught me the angel healing. I could see that she had come in there for a reason, and I held on to it. And I wake up and I'm just sobbing, and I'm thinking, anybody around? I hope nobody's watching me sit at this stoplight just crying, having this experience. And so I kind of drove home in a daze, and I don't know if any of you have had any opening experiences like that, any spiritually transformative experiences, I think they call those these days. But you walk around for days totally blissed out, like you just see the divine light and everything, and all the beauty and everything. But then what happened would be like, after about 3 or 4 days, the contraction would happen, and I'd start settling back in, and it would start kind of close back, and it would be really painful. And then, there was a series of those. This is probably about 7 years after the accident that this was going on. Probably 98, 99, so it was 5, 6 years, that I would just be blasted open, and then the contraction would happen. And then I'd be blasted open, and then the contraction would happen. Have you ever walked around on a campus and realized that everybody is probably like some sort of alien, and they just kind of come to live in human bodies because that makes us all get along? It's pretty trippy when you look at people like that, what you see, their true form. Just different perspectives just flashing in and then closing down. And at some point I finally said, I can't take this anymore. It's really too painful. I'll choose to forego the opening if I don't have to deal with the contraction. Mm-hmm. And then everything became really flat and really boring. That was okay. It wasn't such a roller coaster. And so then I did my time in France, and I came back, and at that point I was really deciding what to do now. I thought I'd only be a little bit in Kansas, and ended up being there for another 10 years. But during that time I met my husband and had my child. And at that time my husband was a philosophy professor, and he hadn't really found the answers to the meaning of life through studying the mind and philosophy. So he was starting to become a spiritual state seeker. And he'd gone to some Zen, working with a Zen Buddhist teacher for a while, and then he met his spiritual teacher, who was a non-dual teacher out of Santa Cruz. And at this point, I was kind of like, okay, Spirit, I know you brought me back for a reason. I know we agreed that I would come back for a reason. You didn't do it, I had a plan, and I get it, but was it really just to come back to Kansas and like work one-on-one with these people individually in an office? Is that what I'm here for? I thought it was something more. I thought I was going to be talking to people. And then in April of, I think it was 2014, I came home from work and I said, hey, I got a hit from Spirit today that I'm supposed to go meet Moki, your teacher, because I hadn't met him yet. He'd been traveling and doing these retreats, but I'd been home with the baby. And I said, so whenever it happens is the right time, so just make it happen. And so in April of 2014, we came out to Santa Cruz, and during that time, the first meeting with this amazing spiritual teacher, he organizes a dinner with 10 people, which I was like, wow, that's not quite as intimate as I had expected. My husband's like, oh, he doesn't do anything for nothing, just go and be with it. Okay. So we meet these amazing people, and then the next night, we're at the bookstore downtown. And I don't know about you, but you go to a bookstore with friends and then you just lose them, because then you try to find them, you're like, let's go, and then you lose someone else, and then you try to find them, and then you lose someone else. And so finally we roll out of the bookstore, and next door to the bookstore was a guy, just one guy, standing outside this restaurant talking on his phone. And my husband's like, oh, look, we met him last night at the dinner. I didn't even notice. Okay. So the guy comes over, and I'm thinking, this isn't even about me. This is about my husband, right? So I'm off talking to a friend, and first words out of the guy's mouth to my husband is, do you know anything about the near-death experience? And I'll tell you, that is the first time I heard that term. And my husband said, well, no, but you should talk to my wife. So the guy looks at me and listens to my story, and he believes me. He doesn't think I'm crazy, and he doesn't think it was my healing brain, and he doesn't think I'm nuts. And I was, that night, I can't tell you how elated I was to have been asleep. I was bouncing off the walls in the hotel room. And this man had some ideas to create a television series around people who had near-death experiences, although he wasn't sure how he was going to do all that. But and so I was on board for that to happen. I don't know how, but and over the year, he went to the Afterlife conference in Portland that year and met Raymond Moody and his wife Cheryl, and they were on board to make it happen. So he flew us all out to Santa Cruz. The Moody's were in Alabama. Flew us all out to have this meeting, and it was like, wow, my tribe, where have you been all my life? We had this amazing experience and decided we really wanted to do this project, and we decided we were going to do symposiums. So this man really thought that with the baby boomers coming to the end of life, that it's really the time to make NDE mainstream. That people need to start talking about this, and we need to have a conversation about what comes next. And I'm on board with that. And so he felt that Santa Cruz was a really great place for that, like a vortex for that to happen. And so the deal was that we were going to move to Santa Cruz, and then so were the Moody's, and we were going to have a class at UCSC, and we wanted to do symposiums to bring awareness to it, and eventually we'd move into this movie thing. And so we go back to our homes, and 6 or 7 months later, nothing was really working. And so I talked to this guy, and I'm like, listen, you know, I think we're all kind of fading away here. We need to make this happen. I think we all need to come together again. So he flies us out in early 2015, and we still don't have an in to the university. We still don't have, you know, we don't have a symposiums idea or anything. 3 days before we arrive, he picks up a gal hitchhiking back to the university, and it turns out she's interested in hospice and the death and dying. She connects him with a professor. We show up 3 days later, and my husband and Raymond and this man go to the university and meet with these professors. Anyway, long story short, by that night we were having dinner with the provost. 3 days later we had a class that my husband co-taught with Raymond. And it was a rocky start, but at that point, well, before I talk about that, at that point we were like, well, what do we do? Do we move? Or do we just send you? I mean, that's a big leap from Kansas to California. And we decided to go for it. It just felt like it was scary, but I felt like Spirit was like, this is it. This is what you came to do. Go. And so we moved, and got the class went. We did our first symposium. You know, didn't have the numbers that we really needed to break even, but we knew we would at the next ones. And then about 3 months after we moved, and probably a couple months into the class, our funder guy just decided he didn't want to do it anymore, and he just dropped it. So Spirit had a plan, just wasn't what I thought the plan was. So here I am in Santa Cruz going, all right, no plan. But, you know, divine order, and friends led me to a hairstylist who had whiplash and couldn't get rid of it. And she came to me, and I got rid of it in one session because it was really, they were working the wrong side. And you know, the hairstylists talk to a lot of people. Do you know a lot of people tell their hairstylist their pain? So that just made my practice. And within a year, I had my own office in Santa Cruz. I also have an office in Los Gatos that I see clients out of. And then I work over the phone with people doing intuitive readings and stuff, which has been really cool. It's been really exciting how just this time in California, you guys are so open. It's so neato. You know, I don't have to like hide anything. I don't have to like, I still find like it's almost scary where I'm like, well, I don't know if I can do that. You know, I don't know how open I can be. I once had, so at some point in the beginning when I was still like, oh, what is this all about? What do I do? How do we survive here in this place that's crazy? Or, you know, that's crazy expensive and wow. And Spirit told me, take anything that comes your way. Whatever comes, you take it. Okay. So a client referred someone to me, and he had, this was the most amazing thing. He had, his mom was in a facility, in a care center, and she was not comatose, but she was not really coherent. And they were not able to fund her dearly. I mean, there was so much love for this woman. You walk into the room and just cards and flowers and, you know, pictures everywhere. But they just couldn't do it anymore. And there wasn't any, the prognosis, she wasn't going to get better. So they wanted me to come and see if I could communicate with her. I'm thinking, wow, yes, I have no idea how, but that's going to happen. And so I sat and I meditated and I connected with her ahead of time. So one thing that happened after the NDE that I've now come to define, we all do, it's just we don't pay attention to, we don't call it that, but that, you know, you can walk into a room and you know if you need to be there or not. You know, you just feel the energy of the space, and I feel that very, very intensely. And so names are vibrations, and you can use someone's name to connect in with the vibration that's them, because it's a sound vibration you've identified with your whole life. And so I would connect in with her name and connect in with her, and I could see she's out vagabonding around. She's hardly in body. She's spending her time doing all these things and, you know, out of body, and she's only staying here because she believes she needs the body to stay connected to her family. And so I go to meet her, and she was more awake than I expected. I expected her to be more comatose, but she was awake, but she couldn't communicate. She just kind of, you know, lays most of the time. And I got into a really centered space, and I sat with her, and I could hear her. And so I started telling the family what I was hearing. And I was pretty amazed by this, and ended up having this amazing healing session. And she woke up. She was elated. She was like, ah! You know, you hear me. I mean, she couldn't say that, but, you know, I could see that her expression was that, and was hugging me and was so happy. And we had this total communication between them, and really healed a lot. And then it came I was trying to help her to relax to see that she could transition. We didn't really talk a whole lot about like her leaving or going. We just more talked about them connecting. And then she said, "You're trying to kill me." And I said, "No, I came here for them. They asked me to come, you know." And she got mad, and she did this, and she closed down, and I couldn't hear her anymore. And I was like, oh, and it was such an unhappy way to leave the session. So I left, and then 2 months later they called me back, and I came back and was with her, and she remembered me. I couldn't hear anything, I couldn't get it, and I was like, oh man, feeling like kind of frustrated, and I asked him to step out of the room, and I told her, and I said, listen, your family loves you, and they just want what's best for you, and they aren't going to be able to afford to keep you here anymore. They're afraid of moving you, that that's going to be too hard for you, or there will be people who don't care for you enough. And they just want to know why you're staying. And we had a really nice talk, and she started opening up, she started communicating again, and then, I mean, she was really funny too, because she tried really hard to communicate, and like, don't push it, just let it flow. But she started communicating again, the family came back in, we had a really nice healing session again, the communication, and then a month or two later, she passed. It was really amazing. And then she started coming and bugging me. Yeah. And a few months later, and I finally, she wanted me to tell her son something, and I was like, I'll sit and meditate, and you can give me the message, and then I'll call him. And I never found time to sit and meditate. And so I finally was like, yeah, I'm just going to call him, and we'll just go that way. So I called him, and I didn't know why. I'm like, listen, we need to have a session. I don't know why. And the interesting thing is, she was getting ready to transition to a more deeply on the other side, to a new space, and she didn't want to lose touch with her family, and he was the one in the family that had the sensibilities to be able to connect with her still, and that he needed to go and learn how to do intuition. And he'd asked me, and at that point I didn't have any workshops, I didn't have anything like that, but he's the one who sparked the idea for my workshops. So he went on his path and is learning his stuff. But just this amazing experience with realizing that that's possible. And so thank you, California people, for helping me to move more into this neat thing. And so that has led to me realizing, you know, this question about how do I teach people how to do intuition, and it's made me really have to fall back into myself and sit with, how do I do that? And that's when I had the realization that I feel things vibrationally, that it's really, if you can, and that you can't really know intuitively what's going on vibrationally with someone else unless you know what you feel like. And so it's led me to develop my workshops. It's 3 of them. So the first one is your unique vibration. And then the second one is your vibration and other people. And then there's your vibration with the non-physical. And the whole idea is that first you have to feel what your vibration feels like. And once that's what the introduction workshop is tomorrow. It's just kind of taking little tidbits from each of those 3 to try to bring it in and help people sort of, in a nutshell, figure out how to connect in with themselves and know their own vibration to be able to then discern the vibration of others. This helps, I work a lot with empaths, people who are very sensitive. We're all very sensitive, but some people really struggle with that sensitivity in the world and come to me because they just don't know how to be in the world without feeling bowled over all the time. So working with them to get into themselves, because most people, especially people who've had trauma, they spend all their time like this, and they're not here. They're feeling the world out here. And so, and we all have our moments of that. And so, if you can come here and then expand out to feel the world out here, then you don't lose yourself in it. And then you can stay in you. And so that's kind of been the development of the workshop series that I'm working on, and where things are to this date. So thanks for listening and for being a part. I hope it inspired you and you saw some of your own life in it. It might help you to move forward a little bit in your own lives. As I said in the beginning, it's always been a little uncomfortable for me to tell my story because I don't want it to be where I'm some novel thing that had this amazing experience to happen and then there's the rest of you. You know, this isn't unique to me. It might be an original story, but it's not unique to me. This is what we all have come from and where we'll go back to. And so anything I can do to help you remember where you came from on your path here and to connect back in with yourself so that you can find your way home more easily, please let me know. Thanks. I'm open for questions, or does anybody need a break first?
Could you talk a little about your body work? Is it a marriage of body, when somebody comes for a session with you? Is it, are they, it's sort of...
How's it happen?
Yeah.
It depends. I have a swath of people who come only for the physical stuff. And usually, so it's a typical massage setting. They'll get undressed, they get under the sheets, and then, you know, I just take out the body part I need and work on the body. And often, if they're open, often information will come. Not always. Sometimes I don't even connect into it because it's just, my hands just do the thing and fix the body because that's where they're at and that's what they can receive. So that's one swath of my clientele. Yeah. And then there are those who come for just the intuitive stuff, and often those people don't want to be on the table. So we'll just sit in the chair and then I'll just kind of read what I'm seeing. And then there's the mix of the two. Usually when it was my favorite stuff to do is the intuitive stuff with a little bit of body work. So I'll usually sit and talk to someone and do the intake, I like to be really clear on how they spend time, how their body spends their time and how they spend their time in body, and any traumas or whatever that might be impacting things. And then also say that before they come, even on phone sessions, especially when it's just intuitive sessions, I read this book on shamanism, and it inspired me. I thought I could do that. This person bowed to the directions to ask information, and so I do that where I'll bow to the east to see what the sun, what is rising up for this person, what's coming up for them, and then to the south is what's the past traumas that may be influencing. And as I bow down, what are they releasing, what are they letting go of? And then the north is who's here to help. And it's just kind of a method I've created in an effort to, because when you're working with spirit, it's usually about the question. It's about what kind of information you're seeking. So it's just a way I've developed to help give me a framework. So I often will do that before the person comes, or when they're getting on the table and I'm standing outside. So I have a little bit of preview of what to expect. And then I will put them on the table, and I hold their ankles and just kind of arc up their bodies and see where there's restrictions or information. My work has changed a little bit in this last couple years. 2 years ago, all the energy on the earth seems to have kind of just changed drastically. That was like Brexit and elections, and everything just went very different. I was one of those people who walked around dizzy for a few days after elections, you know, just everything got energetically radically different. Even the council told me that I would feel like they weren't there, but that because the connection was changing. And that they would still be there, but that it would be different. And it has been. And there was a long period of time I was like, where'd it go? Oh my God! And it's better now. So when that happened, the information I started getting was that the old paradigm is ending, and that the old paradigm, especially medically, was what's wrong and how do I fix it? And the emphasis was on finding what's wrong and the focus spinning around the problem. And that even in my work, it was, you know, where's the restriction, where's the contraction? And the new paradigm is what's right, where's their flow, and how do we create more of it? And so that's kind of how my work has changed a little bit. I still have to keep reminding myself of it because old habits die hard, but so I arc up and then I see more of where the flow is. And I think in these intense times now, we all need to we've all looked enough at our problems. We've all looked enough at what's not working, and that, you know, it's time to look a little more at what is working and where is their flow and how can we move our lives more to opening. So that's a little more of what I do these days.
Thank you.
So.
And when you work with people physically, do you find that what is an issue for them also resonates with certain other issues that are going on for them? I mean, if the part of the body that is in distress is also representative of certain dynamics happening inside of them.
Sure, yeah, and Louise Haig's work is really useful
Okay,
in that,
yes.
just to, as a reference point to kind of give me ideas of what questions to ask, you know. But yeah, or I'll sit, like a lot of times if I'm working on the body and it's more of an intuitive session, you know, not just body work, move and flesh, I'll sit and just sort of unwind the tissue and let my hands sort of drift around, and then I'll go deep inside, and then the information will come. And I'll see, you know, that it was whatever it was, you know, what that connection might be. Totally. I think the body is a reflection of the mind, and they're innately entwined. And if it manifests in the body, it's been there for a long time, in the more energetic body before. And for me, you know, even the energetic part, you know, that woo-woo stuff, that energy work stuff, was hard for me to sort of accept, oddly enough, you know, because it wasn't rational and didn't know, you know, it's that whole filtering thing. But when I learned how to work with the nervous system and craniosacral, but also neural mobilization, working directly with the nerves, it was the aha moment of, well, yeah, that's where the physical and the energetic meet. And so a lot of times I'll work with just the nerves themselves, or it just depends on what layer of the body it's stuck in, you know, or where the flow needs to go. You know, sometimes it's lymph. Lately it's been a lot of lymph. People are really congested. So is that the answer?
Yes, thank you.
Do you think that car accident was supposed to happen to you?
You know, I do.
What was the question?
Do I
I
think the car accident was supposed to happen?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, because 25 years later, I meet some random guy on the street in Santa Cruz, California, who ends up manifesting, you know, facilitating a move here for me and opening up a new part of my life, which is really wrapped around NDE, and I'm actually able to speak to NDE groups. I went to the IAN's board meeting last week and met all the amazing people who are part of this organization. It's just incredible what they're trying to do with this. And it's led me to really think that, yeah, it's probably a good chance that that was supposed to have happened and that was maybe in the plan all along. Although back then, I'll tell you, it was the hardest thing I ever went through. I mean, really,
Sure.
Do you think the council planned the whole thing?
I think we all did.
Right.
I think we did it together. You know, I had to really come to, you know, for a while I was really bitter after the coming back that I was here. I was, not very happy about being back in body and felt obligated to be here because of family and people who pulled me through and because of the council. But I was like, can we just get this over with and be done with it, And then I had to come to terms with, they kept telling me, you're one of us and you're part of this. And I had to really come to terms with the fact that, yeah, I chose to. So I think it was a joint endeavor. But just seeing how 25 years later it's still impacting my life makes me go, that's really interesting. Maybe it was supposed to happen,
But it sounds like you took advantage of every adventure that came your way. You never said no to anything, right? Like, oh, I'll try this, I'll do that, I'll do this, which just...
Well, there was that guy
It's
in
free will.
France who asked me to marry him so he could
Oh, okay,
I said no to that.
that's probably a good move. Yeah.
But I guess, it's again, it's that vibrational thing. There's this thing that happens to me, it's the problem with filters too, why I'm not good with filters. It's if the truth in it's so if I try to, I'm a really lousy liar, right? Because it's here and it just has to come out. And so when something opens and I notice the direction to go, I don't know it here. It's like there's something here that's just like you don't have a choice. When I walked into massage school, it was like, yeah, and I talk about this in my workshops, it's the difference between expansion and contraction. When you feel expanded, that's your yes and your pull. When you feel contracted, it's your stay away and move maybe something else is there. So when that expansion happens, it's like beyond me sometimes, which is really not what I would have consciously or in my head chosen, but it always works out for the best anyway.
And when you mentioned how you were feeling oil that has been going on, that would suggest to me that humanity collectively really is going through a significant change.
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's all over the planet. Things are so intense right now. I don't know about you guys, but the energy's really intense
yes.
these days. There's days where it's like open and then close and then open and then close. It's intense out there. In all levels, on our professional lives, in our personal lives, in our cultural lives. And so, yeah, which is why I look at the problems more. Maybe just where there's more flow. Yeah.
Who is the council again?
So it's a group of light beings that I met on the other side. So, at the risk of going really woo-woo, but you guys are all Californians, so it's okay. I've sat with them and inquired, who are you and who are you and who are you, and I have a journals page somewhere with names and all this, and names are hard because it's really a vibration and it's hard. I have a hard time with names. Like people will ask me, do you get a name? And oddly that I use names to connect with vibrations, but when I'm with a vibration, it's hard for me to translate that into a name. So it's just a feel. So I've gotten names before and sort of their roles, but I don't remember all the details. But there was one time where recently, this is sort of the new evolution and what all this is going on for me, I kept getting all of these clients that were wanting to know about UFOs and about aliens. And I know that there are themes in my office. There's back days. Everybody comes in and has back problems. And I also know that usually it's hard to tell between who's the healer and who's the one being healed. Because in the majority of people, there's something in it for me too, there's messages. And so I kept getting all these people asking these questions. And mostly it was people like, are those alien ships out there ever gonna come down and save us? But I was really confused by it. And about the time of that big shift, there was, I remember just sitting in my kitchen and thinking, usually when I thought of the council, I kind of think of them like when you think about angels, kind of this etheric sort of vaporous thing that's real but not real, And at some point, I just would almost feel like if I looked right and I was open enough, they would just, Star Trek beam me in right in there, And that was a new kind of weird thing for me because I was like, wow, you guys are like real, like physical, and then I kept getting these people asking about aliens and whatnot. And so I went to my hypnotherapist and said, okay, I have some questions. I want to know where I'm from and what this is all about. And so we did this this session, and he took me to this building, I think it was like a healing center or something. And he says, well, is there, and it was sort of this big steeple with this diamond thing on here, and they explained to me the importance of diamonds and how it's like these superconductors, which I guess I think they really are, aren't they? I don't know. But that's, anyway, yeah, and so, and then it had sort of like this little egg thing around it. And I was like, okay, I'm in front of this building, you know, in my subconscious or consciousness, in this hypnotic state. And he says, is there a door? And the door opens, and then like these three like little creature guys like peek their heads around and like, she's here, you're not supposed to be here. She's here, you're not supposed to be here. And I was like, and he said, well, ask me a question. And I said, where am I from? And at that moment, or actually I said, where am I from? I said, no, I know, who am I? And then they kind of went, we're going with your first question. And then I blasted through space, just blackness and stars, flying and flying and flying and flying and flying, and moving through it. And then I came upon some wormhole thing and went through that into another universe, flying and flying and flying, and then upon another wormhole, and then into a third universe. And then I came, boom, right above this planet that was sort of this white, fuzzy, hazy. I was above it. It kind of looked like cotton trees, but without the tree part, just the cottony part around them or something. And I remember, and it was kind of hazy, but then this energy came up to meet me, and it was just right here, and I couldn't see it, but it was a voice I could hear, and I could feel the presence. And it talked to me about love, and it talked to me about, you know, coming to Earth to spread love and to help people find their way home. And I don't remember what else it talked about, but I remember thinking, I know you. You're the voice I heard in the coma. And I recognized it again, I remembered it. And then I thought, then, you know, when you're in consciousness, you travel at the speed of thoughts. And then I thought, well, I wonder if I can go onto the planet. And then at that moment, I started falling backward, and I sucked through the galaxy through a wormhole, and then the other galaxy in the wormhole. But as I'm falling backward, it was that same falling backward feeling. And I remember thinking, and this too I know. This too I knew in the coma. You know, I remembered that feeling. And then back down into Earth, and then bam, and I'm just outside of my body, but in the room. And whoa, the heck was that? And so those are experiences for me, because I come from rationally minded, you know, people, that I'm like, well, that was crazy. You know, was that real? I don't know. You know, was it not? I don't know. It was hypnotherapy, and so my consciousness traveled. But the interesting thing is the week before that happened, one of the guys that was wanting to know about the UFOs, and they don't like that term. The council likes interstellar beings better. But because UFOs kind of make you think of those grays with the googly eye things and scary ones. But this guy kept wanting me to connect in with the council and ask them if the aliens were ever going to come get us off the planet or whatever, or we were going to ever leave the planet or something like that. And I kept telling him I'll meditate and sit with it, and I just never had time again. And so I thought, well, we're just going to tap into your session. We're just going to do it there. And they said, I don't know why you people who have these carbon bodies want to leave the planet, because you can't exist anywhere else but here on Earth, because you have carbon bodies. So, you know, so that's the best I can explain about who they are, and that they're super great supporters and guide. I last week even had someone who is more of a yogi type, who follows a more yogi teacher, and she warned me about hanging out with other beings, and that they, you know, kind of put some doom and gloom, and that they might be leading me the wrong way or whatever. And they were like, listen, don't listen to that. You know, it's all about love. That's what it's all about anyway, you know, following the light. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I'm just wondering if everybody would see those beings, you know?
You know, it's interesting though, because I am not the only one with a council.
Yeah.
There's other people who talk about councils. And I had a session with a gentleman that I met when I spoke at the Ions in Arizona. And he's been doing private sessions with me over the phone or through Skype. And right away, the first session, they told me, tell him he has his own council too. And I told him, and now he's meditating, and he's connecting it with his council, and he's much better at it than I. He's quizzing him, asking him all these questions, who are you, and who are you, and he's made out diagrams. texted me a 10-page document with all the information. But, so I don't think I'm alone in that.
Oh.
No.
I'd like to see your hypnotherapist. Was he or she in Kansas or here?
Santa Cruz.
Really?
Santa Cruz, yes, I will
gotta
share
see
this
that.
information
Is
with
it-
you.
Okay, I
Yeah.
want that number.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I'm curious if, again, thinking about the council, that if you have a feeling that the different members have different qualities and that you showed, in order to represent the council, you showed this 12-figured,
Light ring.
qualities. If you feel that they're some
Um,
kind of harmonic
yeah.
something.
Yeah, some of them do, and I have not, it was just too much for my brain to hold to try to keep all of them separate. I tend to communicate with them sort of as a whole, or there's one that usually speaks, but I can tell in my writing when there's a shift in the voice. And then there's one, and I can't remember what name he gave me, it doesn't really matter, but he's funny. He tells me he uses all these like cultural jokes and somehow his responses are always like song titles and stuff. But he tells me he's not a high vibe guy. He's just someone who likes the high vibes and likes to hang out with them.
Oh, interesting.
He aspires to that or something. So, but then there's others. There are some that are more loving and compassionate, and there are some that are a little more. You need to do this. So there are different personalities, but I tend to kind of just go with them as a group, or hear one or two. But that's a good question, because even I have thought that and have noticed, if I pay attention to that enough when I'm writing, that even my writing style will change, and I can feel the shift when a different energy comes in.
Do you feel that the council are beings that could have lived on Earth? Maybe beings that have passed over? Do you feel like they maybe are beloved ancestors or spiritual guides that go back? Or could they be guardian angels? Do you have a sense of where they came from? Were they in previous incarnations? Did they come in when you came in utero in your mom? Are they with you for your entire lifetime? When you leave the body, do you have a feeling of where you're going to return? In other words, have you pondered the nature of the council and from whence they came, and how are you going to journey with them, or is that going to change?
So a lot of them, I feel, are these light beings from this other galaxy or this other dimension that exist on high frequencies and maybe have not incarnated, but that there's a lot of energies that have a lot at stake, or not a lot of investment in what happens on the Earth, and that so the majority of them are these light beings. I do feel like there are some angelics on the council. That there is that realm, because I've had that connection with that realm, and do have, there's one Ariella that has been, I used to call her my partner in crime or whatever, she was like, high five, that one, thanks for getting me home, or whatever. Yeah, and I sense that when I die, I will likely return to my place with the council, but it's not the end all. That's another passing ground. That the end all is the oneness. It's when we all move back into that space that all is one. And that's just another layer of it, another existence of it, is how I feel it. What else did you ask?
Do you get the sense from being with them that this is quote, Project Earth, but this is some incarnation of the Earth, that there really wasn't Atlantis or Lemuria? Do you get a sense of the evolution of the Earth? You mentioned they have an at-stakeness here. So how is this incarnation of Project Earth different than, have you gotten a sense of, was there ever a peaceful, matriarchal, all-love culture on Earth? Do you have a sense of that?
That does exist, has existed, in parts of Earth. Maybe not the whole of Earth that was matriarchal, but there were definitely those societies and those parts of Earth that existed. And what else was the question?
Do you have a sense of where we're at evolutionarily? Like, is the council, do you get a sense of why are they here now at this moment in time, the shift?
So the idea is to raise consciousness, to get people to move up to a sort of vibrational level that that they can then sustain that on the earth, where it won't ever even be necessary perhaps to even stay in body, but that in being in body, you can hold a vibration that will heal the planet and not make it, falling apart or whatever, all the fear we've been hearing about, but to be able to heal the planet and actually raise the vibration higher. I sense that it has impact throughout the universe, throughout galaxies. That there are many different entities here that have come here in body. As I was saying, when I saw in college, look at all those aliens. That there are, and we all know people that you can, just the variety of people, you can tell that the soul quality or that inner person is not all the same stuff. And so there is that investment to have this heal and move to a better, higher vibrational space where we can raise consciousness and we can all live more in harmony, but in an effort to see what we could really do on the planet, rather than destroying it, seeing what we could really create. And the beauty that we have with our minds and our abilities to use the mind to create things, we could use that for the goodness, and only until the mind is aligned with that spiritual self, with that part which is even ethics, would we be able to do that. And right now the mind has been more attached to body and kind of more gone rogue by itself. And we've forgotten that the mind is not who we are, it is our tool. And that has allowed energies, and I hate to use the dark light thing because I believe it all comes from light. It just depends that some beings have gotten so far away from the light that they forgot who they are. Although that may not be entirely true, because there's not light. And without light, there's not darkness. And you need darkness to come into your lives in order to see the light. And so both are valid and both are necessary here, but they can both go pathological, which has happened. You can get the light going pathological where it's so ungrounded that it can't possibly even see the darkness or even help anything shift. It almost becomes a little bit apathetic and a little bit detached, or a little arrogant sort of feeling, if that makes sense. Or the dark, we all kind of know where the dark goes when it goes pathological. We have plenty of examples of that. So, both need to coexist, but they've gone to the extremes now. And so the desire is to bring it back, but also to bring it back so that what if we could live like the whole oneness thing on Earth? What if we could live, without the polarities, but we could actually live unity? Wouldn't that be cool?
Did you ever ask your council, what is the meaning of the incarnation to begin with? What is the meaning of suffering?
Suffering helps us see the light. Without darkness, there would not be light. And, there's that whole, there are a lot of souls here who came here originally for whatever reason. Some people came here because they just thought it would be really neat to have an incarnation and have a physical experience, because you can't experience anywhere else what you can experience here. You can't experience human emotion like you can here. You can't experience touch like you can here. So some people came because of that. Some people came, I feel part of my path is to come to help pull flowers out of the cracks, help people who need help getting home, because so many people came for whatever reason they came originally and then lost their way back. And they haven't found their way home. We all know those people, who are kind of lost and in the cycle of samsara. And so the suffering, part of it probably, I would imagine, is karmic. Yes, karmic. It's that if you don't look at it as individual lives, but you look at it as the length of the journey of your essence, or soul, or whatever you want to call it, or your alien self, or whatever. So what's a soul anyway? Whatever that thing that's not in body is, it's part of it's the journey of that. And so, this is one blip in that journey. And some people are in that journey and about to go back to where they came from, and some people are still really struggling and trying to find their way out. And so some of us come here to help on whichever level we can help on, and some people come here just because they want to, well, only the French words are coming. Foutre le bordel. Make problems. And, you know, I don't think we all come for the same reason, you know, especially now. You know.
We were already the light. Why do we need to seek the light when we
Right.
came from the light to begin with?
Right, but how would you know it's the light if you didn't have darkness?
The disparity, right?
Yeah, that's the gig here, right? It's polarity. You know?
Is what polarity?
Polarity, you know? It's duality. It's good and bad, tall and short. Everything is polarized. There's a duality. That's what it's about here.
When you had your experiences, were they non-dual experiences?
I have. I've gone there in consciousness, and it's a pretty amazing experience. Yeah. Have you?
No,
Oh.
I wish I did. But I'm just curious, why would we come from non-duality into duality when we
Well,
didn't
my
need it?
experiences were while I was in duality. I mean, I'm still in a human body. And just at the basic level, there's an inside me and an outside me, you know. But in consciousness to go to that non-dual space, you know. And some people choose not to come here. They'd rather stay in duality. And then some, maybe in your case, you know, at the origin, you thought, wouldn't it be fun? Let's go try it out. And then you're like, oh crap, how do I get back home? I can't find a way out of here.
Right. Hold my beer.
Right. Exactly. Thank you. Follow expansion. Where's the flow?
You know, when you talk about polarity and light and dark, there's physical light and there's physical dark, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a moral or ethical attribute assigned to that. Sometimes
Sure.
we think of dark as bad or evil. So, but don't you think, I mean, it always seems possible to me that there could have been a life, even here on Earth, with human beings or beings, and there could be light and there could be dark, but there doesn't have to be evil.
Right.
I think evil somehow is not necessarily a part of the polarity.
I would agree with that. I think that that's what I mean when the light and the dark go pathological.
Oh, okay, good. I just wanted to make sure you weren't necessarily linking evil with darkness. I don't think it
No.
comes with that
No,
back.
it's the yin and the yang. I mean, it's part of the duality. You know, that's what I meant when I said, you know, dark and light coexist, and in their healthy forms, they find a balance and they're good expressions.
Mhm.
You know, but in their pathologies, then it creates a lot of
Yeah, and
dissonance.
humans seem to have assumed that bad is inevitable. You think of, as far back as we know, a lot of the mythology, but I do think there could have been cultures where humanity was good. I don't know if you've had a conversation with the council about that.
I haven't. It's a really good one to have.
That it could actually be blissful.
Mhm.
I think that is our true nature.
Mhm.
I don't think polarity means there has to be bad.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
No, I meant just more that there's the contrast,
Mm.
you know, but it doesn't have to be good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be evil and.
Yeah. In fact, I know some people who have gone beyond that say there's actually, well, in his particular case, he said there's 7 levels of bliss.
Mm.
So we don't even have words for it, so I don't think we have consciousness to contemplate it.
Mhm.
But it makes sense that it would be other frequencies, right?
Right, totally.
Yeah.
Well, and like when I would have those blast me open experiences, I
Mhm.
would walk around and I'd be in that bliss for days, and everywhere
Yeah.
I'd look, I'd see the light.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it'd be totally, I mean, that's why I have that picture of grass. The first time I walked out of the hospital and saw grass, I was just like, wow, it's so beautiful.
Mhm.
You know, and even still, there's times where I'm just amazed at the vibrations that come out of the grass, you know. But then, as I came back into the human form, or out of that blissful state, for me it was painful, just the contraction.
Mhm.
But it wasn't evil,
Yes.
it wasn't bad, it was just a contraction,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's only when it
It's almost
goes-
like you need to tune your cells to a different metabolic frequency.
Something, yeah, yeah.
And that could be what's happening.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
could be, you know, I think for a lot of us even, you know, just that whole how do we, you know, you have one day like this, you know, but you're right, it's probably just retuning to a certain frequency, yeah,
Mhm.
thanks.
It's a hard assignment to be here. I
Mhm.
mean, it really is. It's very challenging,
Yeah, but it's also beautiful, you know, and blissful at the same time.
very intense.
You know, intense is a good word for it, that's what I usually say, it's really intense.
But you know, along those lines, I was talking with a therapist recently who used the word metabolize, because he said, when a lot of this intensity comes, what we're actually learning to do is metabolize our experience, because there's so much happening experientially right now on Earth,
Totally.
and yet, instead of being just overwhelmed, what if we learned how to metabolize it?
Right,
So then
Well,
we're
yes.
raising our frequency.
Yes.
right, right.
Yes.
I'm hearing also that it's really even about cellular structure,
Yes.
and within the cells, you know,
Vibration.
the vibration of the cells.
Vibrational, yeah, and it's almost like coping. It's like, almost like an evolution that we're in the midst of right now,
Right.
to cope with what we have to cope with,
Mhm.
and to stay sane and to keep finding joy is like breathing, it's like all these things, finding resources, having conversations like this to learn to metabolize,
Definitely.
to like consciously raise our own frequency.
You're right.
That seems like what's before us, don't you think?
Mhm.
I do
Yeah.
think that, I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and even, you know, when the frequency shifted, you know, a couple years ago, it's been even more intense since then. But I think you're right, I think it's really about an integration period. You know, when I came back, even as a kid, I felt like I had come here to do something, and I think a lot of us feel that way. And I think, I thought, you know, maybe I missed the boat again this time, but, you know, they're not burning them at the stake anymore, so maybe, well, I don't know, you know, those witch trials and all that. That was maybe missing the boat. But, and then when this energy frequency shift happened, you know, a couple years ago, I realized, it's happening. Maybe this is the time. Maybe we did come at the right moment this time. Maybe we are going to actually make a shift. You know, maybe it is possible. And I think it's totally valid that this is that period of integration afterwards where we're all trying to stabilize this new frequencies.
And to be able to take it in, and I think metabolize is a good way to think
Yeah,
about
that
it.
is a great
To be able to contain what we are being asked to contain.
Or process it anyway. I
Right.
mean, we probably can't contain it, it's all, we're a part of it all.
Right.
But how do we process it? You know what it is? It's almost like with a laptop, you know, we're having to continually update. You know how every time you
Yes.
get your phone, it's like wanting you to update your software?
Yes,
It's
yes.
like every freaking day, we need to like keep updating our software and just get more RAM and get more hard drive and keep up with the processes that are
Yes,
happening.
yes.
It's like that whole neural consciousness of
Yes.
the planet. We keep having to keep up with, you know, the situation.
Yeah.
You know, it's an apt analogy. It does feel very much like that.
And it's intense.
And the technology that we've just been introduced to in the last decade has amplified everything so much. So, yeah, it's all the levels.
And connected us, you know, remind us that it is all connected, you know.
Are you basically like tapping into the Akashic records?
I don't do a lot of work with the Akashic records. I do know people who do.
So it's different.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. That's more like the book of time, you know, or all that has occurred and all that is happening, sort of thing. And I'm
So
not
you
as
do the
much.
same thing where they say the name of the person and that gets
Oh,
the
interesting.
vibration, and then you get access to
Oh,
their beings that want to share messages with them.
well, that's interesting. I had never heard that, but it's a really good question for me to sit with,
Yeah, you might actually be doing it and not knowing.
not knowing. Maybe I should ask that
I
question.
guess it's just a word,
Yeah.
a council.
Well, and all of it is
Yeah.
words, you know, I mean, we're
Yeah.
all trying to find words for the vibrations we're experiencing, you know. I mean, how do you describe an emotion, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
How long have you been in California, and what's it like for you when you go back to Kansas? Do they think you're all like weird California now, or?
I've been in California for almost 4 years, 4 years in June, I think. No, they don't think I'm weird, but you know what? I was in Lawrence, Kansas, which is pretty open-minded college town, and there's a lot of alternative healers, a lot of spirituality going on, and pretty much, honestly, almost everything that I have here, I had there. It's just, I have it tenfold here, you know.
But that's very encouraging to hear that.
But it's just a small spot, you know. But so, you know, my circle of people, they don't think it's that weird. They're all really excited for me. And they all think that, you know, yay, you're moving into it, you know, sort of thing. You know, my family, they just love me, and they just think that whatever. I don't think they understand, and they don't argue anymore. They don't, you know, I grew up feeling like I was the weirdo, but I don't feel that way anymore. They just love me as I am, and that's it, you know. They kind of learned that there's not really any arguing with it anymore.
Why did you feel like a weirdo, if you don't mind me asking?
Because I saw things and did things that other people didn't do or see, you know, and I had experiences that couldn't be rationally explained or understood.
Sorry, I missed the beginning.
No, it's okay. And, you know, for instance, you know, my mom's side of the family, the women are very intuitive. You know, that's where a lot of, I think, my intuitive skills come from. But it's always been treated as this, like, that quirky, weird thing that happens. Oh, I knew they were going to call it that funny. You know, and never really given the credibility around it, and or been pushed to be polished or to work with. So that's what I mean.
Did you feel like you're vibrating on a different frequency? And
Most
then
of the
did you ever?
I never felt like I fit in Kansas.
Yeah, and
I
did
never,
you,
even when I was a kid, I felt like I lived under a bubble
did
that I
you,
needed to break out of.
When did you, was it when you came here that you felt like you were vibrating on the right frequency, or?
It has been a shift for me here because of the circumstances, you know, and the instability that was created with that, you know, when we came from one project and then it went away and then I had to really work to recreate everything. And it's been recreated and I'm recreating it. And y'all are intense.
We are
really.
Californians?
Yeah, you guys are. I mean, it's everything here, but like on steroids.
And that's why we're all here.
I mean, yeah, but you know, homelessness was a really hard frequency for me to hold. There's a lot of homelessness in Santa Cruz, and I live near downtown, and I can't go downtown very often. One of the things I moved to Santa Cruz, I was really excited, was the downtown and all the coffee shops, because it was a lot like downtown Lawrence, and I thought, hey, it's not a big jump, and I can't go downtown very often because it is not a judgment or anything, it's just the frequency, I feel it, and then it's easy for me to get pulled into that spiral.
But what's the frequency? Is it just over empathy or like empathy overload, or is it?
No, it's not even empathy, I don't pity. It depends on the person, but it's, they hold a noble place in the world. They hold the place to remind us of contraction and to remind us of that heavier frequency. You know, whether it's not even about their situation or their circumstances, it's the frequency that they hold, which is that frequency of suffering, you know, and of lack. And that's when you're in a situation where things feel unstable, it's very hard for me to exist in that lack, around that lack frequency, because I tend to pull myself into it. And that's my work to do, is to remember that I'm separate, because after the NDE, I didn't feel separate anymore. I don't feel, boundaries are a real challenge for me. I have a hard time with that, because a boundary feels like a wall, and I have to end up spending all my time on this wall. And I can't tell, I mean, I recently had an experience where, you know, I didn't have enough boundaries and created this whole drama with this client that is basically going to produce. I just don't have that ability to see the differences between me and them, you know. And if I see someone who's homeless, I see myself. And when you have a 10-year-old, 11-year-old child, and you're trying to keep them in, you know, private school, who, however supportive, you still have to pay for it, you know, a little bit. And when you're trying to build your business, you know, being in that lack frequency is a really hard frequency to be in, you know, and it still hits me, you know. You know, I live on a street where there's a lot of college kids, and I told my husband, I was like, every time I'm coming home and I'm driving down that street, I just really want to come home and smoke pot. And he's like, but you know there's a lot of dealers on that street, don't you? And I don't have that awareness, and I'm like, really? He's like, haven't you noticed there's always a car stopped and then someone getting out and coming in, like, all the time? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I just thought there were a lot of people who lived in that apartment, you know, I mean, so it's just that inability to recognize that which is not me, which I guess is funny since I teach this whole vibrational thing, you know, but it's a constant work, you know, because essentially we are all one.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
I do think states of consciousness are very contagious,
Mm.
because we
Right,
are
right,
one,
that's a good
and
way to
so
say
we
it.
do, we're very contagious to one another.
Yeah, that's great. States
How
of
important do you
consciousness.
think it is that we are with people we resonate on the same frequency with?
I think it's very important. It depends. It depends what frequency you're at and where you want to be. You know, if you're a homeless dude and you're happy about that, then you can vibrate on that level. But if you really want to be out of it and you want to do something more, then you're going to have to start working around people who are not in so much lack, for instance.
So what do you do with your incapacity to keep yourself separate from people? Do you use that for healing?
Yeah, that's how I do a lot of it, is I just kind of merge in with them and figure it out that way. It's funny because they were talking about me going to the IANS conference in the end of September, IANS, not IONS, but IANS, and the Near Death Studies group. And then they were like, hey, we're going to have a healing room. Would you like to run the healing room? And I'm like, absolutely. Because I get overwhelmed in conferences. I'll just come out every once in a while and walk around a little bit, and then I'll go back into the little room and I'll be fine, people come to me, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I've done for the last 25 years, is I have a healing room, and people come to me. And I can fire them if I have to, you know. I mean, I don't usually do that, don't want to, but, you know, it's just I've created ways in my life to create filters so that I don't have to do that.
When's the conference? Where?
I think it's Labor Day weekend in Philadelphia.
Dualistic teachers, I
A
think you
dual
said,
teacher,
I'm not sure, what was the name? Mokti?
Mokshananda.
So, do you find that those two worlds collide? I don't know if it's your teacher now too. I guess I'm very involved in that, and I'm also involved in this, and sometimes the thought comes up like, is this just another story? And is it about sort of getting out of stories, you know, finally? So I was just wondering for yourself, like, where you find peace with that.
I like non-duality a lot. I find that it's a really hard thing to reach, that most of the time you can move into a space almost like the witness space, and it can almost, if you get stuck there, it can create sort of apathy or a certain otherness, you know, a detachment. And that a lot of times that's where people get when they're trying to go to non-duality. And so I think that can easily go pathological, you know, where you just don't care anymore. And so I have a little bit of issue with that. But I think that truly going to non-duality is really when you step out of even beyond the witness state and into is all one, you know. And I don't see any conflict with that.
Great, thanks.
A lot of people now are into immortality and life extension, and some people say people can have lived for 1,000 years, and we'll be able to take a small patch of our skin and use stem cells, which will be able to repair and regenerate. So I'm really intrigued by that, and I'm wondering if you ever had any conversation with the council about immortality?
I haven't, but that's another great idea to have a conversation. I gotta take
I'm
some
gonna
notes.
give you a list
Yeah,
of
you
things
give her the
to
list.
take to the council, and we
Yeah,
should have a
totally.
get together and come back with
Totally.
yeah.
I mean,
Because,
If you
for
wanna stay in
example,
this
Jeff
body, you
Bezos
could.
is the world's wealthiest man. He's investing in a high-tech company that is researching immortality. One group is called SENS, S-E-N-S, and their mission is to make 90 the new 30 to make 90 the new 50 by 2030. And that's moving in that direction. But there's a lot of really interesting information. There's a jellyfish that goes along in life
oh,
and
I
gets
know, I
so
heard about
old,
that.
and
it goes
then it
backwards.
becomes young again. I said, the jellyfish can do it, we can do it. So I am hoping that in our lifetimes that we can race ahead, because there's just basically, I think, a mutation that makes our cells senesce, which means grow old. Even lobsters don't senesce.
Mhm.
So if we can fix, it's almost like a bug in a software, if we can rewire the pituitary gland, we won't senesce, we won't age.
Mm.
Or we can fix ourselves at a point where we want to stay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be useful, and it could not be useful.
Yeah.
I don't think our
You know,
planet
I
can
heard
handle
this.
it.
I heard this. You know, I don't know. I mean, some people. You know, I mean, I just think about, are we ever going to get over war? You know, and boy, if they keep staying here that long, I mean, what are they going to do to each other? I mean, you know.
Depends on who lives that long.
Exactly. Exactly. What did I hear? I read this somewhere, and it really has always resonated with me. That at one point, we were able to remember our past lives, but that we would carry grudges for so long and just go one life after another with grudges that they took away the power to remember past lives, so that we could move and start fresh and actually evolve. And I think that that also speaks to immortality. You know.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Oh, do you think the brain is just a shutdown valve, shutting down reality? Shutting
What do
down.
you-
Oh, there's a theory that the brain is just a condenser and stuff.
I think the brain is a lot more complex than we've discovered, and that it depends on which parts of the brain you're using. But I also think that the mind is not local, and that it's really about the mind more than the brain when using those components. So yeah, I could see how that could be the case. You know, I also see how, you know, like about the time that I was using, that I was getting the information around the UFO stuff, I went to the library, and I usually just spend time in the kids sections, and Spirit was like, you gotta go downstairs, and I'm like, okay. So I go down there, and I'm standing in front of it, I feel guided to this bookshelf, and I'm like, oh, well, at least you hit me into the, you know, the spiritual stuff, you know, or the consciousness stuff, and I'm staring at it, and I'm like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, kind of getting frustrated, because I'm like, why am I here? I gotta go. And then this book just becomes like kind of very clear, and I pull it out, and it's by Ken Ring, and it's called the Omega Project.
Yeah.
And he did research, I think it was Ken Ring, he did research comparing UFO abductions and NDEs, and that there's a huge parallel. And in that, they have discovered that if you stimulate the temporal lobe, you can produce out-of-body NDE-like experiences.
Wow.
So, which I think is fascinating in my case, because the left temporal lobe is where I cracked, you know, and had the head injury. I don't think that stimulating it is what causes them. I think that maybe that's just the part of the brain that lights up when it's happening. I'm not sure that, you know, just because that part of the brain is lit up that it means it's not real. But it does show us the capacity of the brain. That you lose it kind of stuff, and you know, if you keep your brain always on the same sort of habitual tract, then you're only going to have a certain perspective of reality. You know, so it's up to us to choose the perspective. You know, like I could easily say I had this car wreck 25 years ago. It was the hardest thing that ever happened in my life, and the damn thing is still plaguing me. It made me move to California, and now I'm, you know, poverty-stricken, and I'm struggling to get my business going, and I'm trying to rebuild here, and I'm dealing with all that. Or I can say, that thing was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was hard, but I learned so much, and it even 25 years later is still affecting me and bringing me to California to where I actually could expand it as a healer even more than I ever imagined. And both are true. It's all about what you use your brain, what perspective you take. You know.
Has the council ever mentioned anything about whales and dolphins that are supposed to have even larger brains and more advanced consciousness than us? Have you ever wondered about that or spoken to them?
Nope, but it's
about
another
that?
question.
Okay.
I definitely would suggest that you give her the list.
Yeah, give me the experience with dolphins, and that, you know, my son was part of Little Guards, and they were all at the Capitola Beach running, and a pot of dolphins just came and was playing while the kids were running and stuff. It was really great.
Lastly, I'm really interested in coming tomorrow. Is there anything you wanted to mention about tomorrow's workshop? Do dress or
No.
preparation?
No, bring your lunch.
Okay.
Because we scheduled it from 10 to 2, and that's over the lunchtime, so I thought it would be better to just bring our lunches, and then we can eat while we're here, instead of having to go somewhere and take a break and cut time and stuff, so,
So it's 10 to 2.
yeah. Yeah, it was a time that worked well for me, so nobody had to get up on a Saturday morning early, and I could still be home early enough for bedtime, you know? But then I realized, oh, that was right over lunch, you know, so.
Great.
And tomorrow, so I have handouts, and because I don't like to do workshops if you don't have something to take home with you. Because we all have this experience as you go to read. I remember I tried reading it, and it just was too hard for me to read for some reason. And I've had that experience with a lot of indie books. For some reason, my brain just can't take it in.
I had trouble with her book too.
Yeah.
Whose book?
Betty Eady.
Oh.
I feel like we talk a lot about, we've had advances in technology and medical technology, this technology, consciousness technology, but what is the council saying about emotional technology? And there's only, for me in my life, would have helped me a hell of a lot sooner if I had found out about a few people that are really, like, and I mean, I didn't even have awareness of what to call each emotion because nothing was modeled
Right.
to me.
Right.
And then you have the stuff like traumas getting lodged in there, creating these vibrational pits, you know, and they're all connected to the feeling in emotions that pretty much subconsciously run
Right.
run us basically
Right.
until they're healed,
Right.
and
Right.
create things like wars and
Mm-hmm.
you know, like these subconscious drivers that
Mhm.
make people do all these crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because they want the experience, like you say, when they come here, but
Right, but then they get
you
stuck
know,
in
I
the
feel like
crazy
there's a very big empty space in that.
round emotions.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's totally vibration. You know, I mean, that's what you feel emotions. It happens viscerally, you know, and cognitively. And then there's the whole mind emotion loop. You know, I mean, you have a thought and it creates an emotion, and then it reinforces a new thought, and then it reinforces the emotion, and then you're off to the spin. I mean, that's what you're talking about with people who do crazy crap, you know, it's you get into the spin, and then how do you stop the spin? You know, whether you can label the emotion or not, because my experience is that I can argue with the emotion all I want, it's not going to change anything. It's still going to be like, ah, you know, and I can also argue with the thought all I want, and it's not going to change anything either. Because it's always, your rational mind's always going to find a way to justify anything. And so when the spin starts, what I've had to really do is just notice the spin, for one. And then to tell my mind, oh, did you forget we're doing it differently now? Oh, look, a squirrel. You know, sometimes it's as simple as that. It's the distraction of the mind to something else, so that you're not just processing this loop, you know. And sometimes that's easier than having to struggle with the emotion. And then you can be with, at the same time, it's important to be with, when you are with someone and you feel this sort of, you know, what I work on in the workshops is, you know, really noticing that when it comes across as an emotion, like let's say you feel jealousy of someone and you're like, ah, and it's a contraction, it's a sort of thing that happens, and you may not even want to label it as jealousy because nobody wants to admit they're jealous, you know, but it's still, you can still feel the contraction. And so instead of, what we usually do is we react to that. You have an emotion, and then it's, that doesn't feel good. And then if you're an internal processor like myself, you tend to go, what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling this way? That's awful judgmental. Why am I doing, you know, and then that starts the spin. Or if you're an external processor like my husband, you'll tend to go, what's wrong with you? Look at that. Look what they're doing. They're so wrong. You know, and then you'll create the external spin. But it's still that same mind emotion loop until you can finally just say, whoa, I just felt this contraction, and I can just respond to it. Hey, maybe it's not anything about me or about them. Maybe there's no story behind it. Maybe it's just a symbol of, in case of jealousy, I want that too. Well, what if I could move into what would help, the question of what's it going to take for that to happen, so that I can expand towards it, rather than creating a whole story or a whole contraction or a whole sort of cycle of spin around it, right? So the more you can drop into you, then you can notice how things affect you, and then you can respond rather than react. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Anybody else? I think we're at 9:40, but I'm still going if you are.
Thank you, you're very genuine.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
So there's my info is back there if you want to be in touch. I work over the phone. I know you all are far away from Santa Cruz and from Los Gatos, but I do work over the phone or Skype or FaceTime or whatever method, Zoom. And my email list is back there. Right. The email list is back there if you want to be on my email list.
Thank you.